Not everyone needs to spend top dollars on a flagship smartphone. With growing market competition, companies have been putting out some really impressive semi-flagship phones at much more wallet-friendly prices. And today I have two such phones, the OnePlus 9RT and the Xiaomi 11T Pro. In terms of price, the 11T Pro is slightly cheaper than the OnePlus 9RT, so Xiaomi does have a competitive edge in this regard. However, it is not that simple when deciding between these phones. But don't worry, I am here to help. For this, I have tested the 9RT and the 11T Pro across different categories. And in this video, I'll be going through them at length. As always, to make the comparison as fair as possible, I will be distributing points across various aspects to both phones with varying weightage, like this. Okay, let's start with the gaming side of things. Here, despite the same Snapdragon 888 chip, high-speed DDR5 memory and UFS 3.1 storage on both these phones, the OnePlus 9RT is considerably ahead in this department. Most of it has to do with the effective vapor chamber liquid cooling on the 9RT, where it manages to deliver excellent results, especially when gaming. On the contrary, the Xiaomi 11T Pro suffers from terrible thermal throttling. Take Genshin Impact gameplay for instance. At the highest graphics settings, the 9RT gives off an impressive 57 FPS with 97% stability. But the 11T Pro is way too unusable in these settings, manages roughly 51 FPS average with 69% stability. A while into the game, this number drops to just 25 to 28 FPS. The 9RT also suffers from mild frame drops 15 to 20 minutes on, but ultimately its results are way superior even in terms of temperature. It's the same when bringing down the graphics quality to high as well. Relatively less demanding games like PUBG Mobile yield a somewhat comparable result on both phones. But here too, I noticed better thermals on the 9RT. Onto the high FPS ready games, the Xiaomi 11T Pro does have a small edge. Although Critical Ops has 120 FPS mode enabled on this phone, the 9RT maxes out at just 60 FPS. Still, you can make full use of the 120Hz refresh rate display on both phones on titles like Oddmar and Injustice 2. Alright, besides gaming, the regular everyday usage is fine on either of them though. Also, I faced no heating issues under lightweight to medium workload, which includes browsing through social media apps, streaming Netflix and YouTube, etc. To further evaluate them, I ran my usual app opening and multitasking test. Surprisingly enough, the OnePlus 9RT lost this contest by a big margin. I am not sure if this has something to do with the Oxygen OS ColorOS merger, but OnePlus can fix this aggressive RAM management with a software update. Until then, I am awarding the points to the 11T Pro in this round. Now getting to the software, sadly both these phones currently boot on Android 11. And although both Xiaomi and OnePlus have promised 3 years of OS upgrades, it does not quite feel right because Google has already launched the developer preview for Android 13 for Pixel phones. Anyway, both Xiaomi's MIUI and OnePlus's Oxygen OS are quite responsive, mostly bloatware-free, and their UI and UX feels fast and fluid too. But as you might already know, MIUI is notorious for its comparatively buggier experience, and the Xiaomi 11T Pro is no exception. On a couple of occasions, I noticed the adaptive refresh rate was not working well, blasting a constant 120Hz all the time. Plus, it's a little harsh on smaller background processes too. So the OnePlus 9RT for me is still a clear winner on the software front. Okay, let's now talk about the display. Putting their specs side by side, it's clear that Xiaomi 11T Pro has a superior screen. From its 10-bit color depth, Dolby Vision support to Gorilla Glass Victus protection, this is one stunning display. In their default picture settings, the 11T Pro retains better whites and a more natural color tone. I also found the 9RT is a little off with maintaining contrast, and content tend to look a bit dark. However, 11T Pro's display is not perfect. As you can see, there is a definite off-axis color shift here where things appear greenish when looking at it from the sides. Overall, if I had to pick a smartphone for multimedia purposes between these two, I would definitely go with the 11T Pro. Besides its superior display itself, the phone also has a proper set of stereo speakers. Tuned by Harman Kardon with Dolby Atmos audio, it has a wider soundstage, it gets louder, and retains comparatively clearer clarity than the competition. Here, let me play some music so that you'll have a better idea. 'Cause yeah, sometimes we'll feel alone. In a second, I'll be right there. Turn around, let it rain. Turn around and let it rain on me. The Xiaomi 11T Pro, however, disappoints big times in terms of how the phone looks and feels on the hand. Despite all the premium build materials, it's simply way too wide to be comfortable to hold for most people. While the 9RT is in no way a compact phone, it's certainly the more ergonomic of the two. Also, the aluminium brush finish on the 11T Pro looks awfully boring. I know this is a subjective thing, but I feel like most people will prefer OnePlus 9RT's design overall. Plus, you also get an in-display fingerprint sensor on the OnePlus 9RT as opposed to the old-fashioned side-mounted fingerprint reader on the 11T Pro. Onto the cameras, I have divided this section into two parts, photos and videos. And right off the bat, you should not buy either phone for their cameras. I've made that quite clear in my review of the OnePlus 9RT, but let's brush up on that once more. When it comes to still images, there's something off with both phones. The 9RT shots are warm, they're contrast heavy, and end up looking dark most of the time, whereas the 11T Pro favors a brighter, slightly overexposed photos with a bluish hue instead. Shifting to the ultra-wide angle camera, we can notice the switcheroo in terms of color science between these phones. Besides, both 9RT and 11T Pro's ultra-wide photos are not as detailed as you'd like them to be. Portraits, on the other hand, come off way too over-sharpened, contrasty, and relatively oversaturated on the 11T Pro. 9RT's portraits are not exactly that great, with a soft and hazy result, but I guess it's the lesser of the two evils. Then again, low-light photos are noticeably nicer on the OnePlus 9RT, which preserves the detail and black levels far better. 11T Pro's artificially brightened images just look unnatural. The 11T Pro fails to deliver similar exposure levels with ultra-wide-angle nighttime shots where images also tend to look a bit muddy. In this contest, the 9RT has slightly superior sharpness. Even under night mode, I like the results from the OnePlus 9RT since its photos retain better contrast and a more balanced exposure from both the wide and ultra-wide-angle lenses. For macro photography enthusiasts, the 11T Pro's tele-macro camera with a variable autofocus is a great tool. With it, you can take great close-up shots that are leagues ahead of the OnePlus 9RT's puny 2-megapixel macro camera. Okay, as for the selfies, neither phone is able to process human skin tone that well. The 11T Pro, once again, clicks over-sharpened images with a dark tone, while 9RT selfies look soft and introduce this unusual reddish tint to the subject's face. Although exposure control is somewhat better here. Same thing with the portrait selfies. Overall, because I cannot pick a solid winner in this aspect, I am dividing the point among them here. Moving on to videos, even though the 11T Pro can shoot up to 8K 30fps, I don't think this necessarily delivers an upper hand to the phone since 8K recording is simply an overkill for most people. Looking at the 4K 60fps footages instead, I like the 9RT's dynamic range more. Since this option is not complemented by any form of stabilization on either phone, you'll notice slight wobbles every now and then. Bringing it down to 1080p 60fps, they're pretty similar on the stabilization front, with 9RT producing marginally steadier videos thanks to OIS. But the 11T Pro's audio pickup and background noise cancellation are audibly better from both the front and back cameras. And Xiaomi even lets you record up to 1080p 60fps selfie videos compared to the 1080p 30fps limit on the 9RT. Despite lackluster exposure control in both phones, in a controlled lighting environment, the 60fps has a slight advantage. Lastly, as you can see, neither of them has a wide enough field of view, with the 11T Pro being the narrower of the two. All in all, I find the Xiaomi 11T Pro to be the more capable video phone. That's because apart from its usual recording ability, the company has added a bunch of options like HDR10+ mode, movie effects, audio zoom, etc., which I believe are quite useful for modern day vloggers. Onto the battery, it's pretty easy to conclude that the 11T Pro has better endurance. I mean, both phones have a similar AMOLED display and the same Snapdragon 888 chip, all the while the 9RT has a 10% smaller battery. But to my surprise, I got about 1 to 1.5 hours less screen on time on the 11T Pro on average. It's almost impossible to duplicate the same usage style on both phones, so I also ran PCMark's Worth 3.0 battery life test to get to the bottom of this. And yes, its result speaks in favor of the OnePlus 9RT as well. Charging is equally impressive on both phones though. The 11T Pro supports a whopping 120-watt fast charging that can fill up its larger battery in just 17 minutes, while the upgraded 65T warp charge on the OnePlus 9RT takes about half an hour for a full refill. Plus, both Xiaomi and OnePlus ship the compatible power adapter inside the box itself. So for this round, I am sharing equal points to both the phones since, let's face it, their difference is not at all substantial. But I have to tell you that I am more fond of the OnePlus 9RT's haptics. It has precise feedback that delivers a great typing experience or when navigating through the phone. On the other hand, the 11T Pro settles with a loud, shrill vibration motor that ultimately pales in comparison to the OnePlus 9RT. So what about some assorted features? Oh yes, 5G bands. Thankfully, neither phones cut corners in this regard, and both of them bring a few unique qualities too. You have the iconic alert slider on the OnePlus 9RT, whereas the 11T Pro still hangs on to the IR blaster. As a result, it's only fair to distribute a point to each this time. Alright, looking at the final scores, it seems that we have a tie in our hands. But does that mean the OnePlus 9RT and the Xiaomi 11T Pro are a couple of similar phones? Absolutely not. In general, I like the OnePlus 9RT more despite its higher price tag. Not only does it have a superior performance, including gaming, its design and its battery life are equally impressive. The 11T Pro does have a better display and better speakers, but as a whole, I don't find it that appealing. So if you are torn between these phones, the 9RT makes more sense. But like I said in my individual review of these phones, last year's iQOO 7 Legend is currently available at a great price and it outclasses both of them in many aspects. Moreover, if you can wait for a few weeks, the iQOO 9 series is launching soon in India as well, which should offer an even better smartphone experience at a similar price. So there you have it guys, our full comparison of the OnePlus 9RT and the Xiaomi 11T Pro. I hope this video has made your purchase decision easier, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notifications icon if you like our content. Till then, I'm Pratima and thank you so much for watching.